It's been a while since I had a presentation, so this is the first time since COVID. I went fully digital, fully into streaming, and it's good to be back. There will be some audience participation, so I am preparing you. So you're seated well enough for that. There's an interesting story, by the way. Party last night, amazing. So Innovative and the production crew, I know you guys didn't get the party. You were here in the morning taking care of us. The party was amazing, thank you so much. I'm very happy to announce that I've did time this talk to exactly 45 minutes. I was kind of proud of that moment. They asked me to be a little bit shorter, so thanks. So Dirk, whom you just seen on stage, sorry. Dirk, whom you just seen on stage, I had a conversation with him yesterday. Apparently everybody's hosting Silverstripe, or most of you are hosting Silverstripe with him. And I asked him, well, why are you so valuable? You know, this is a talk about value. How does he create value for you? And he told me that, well, most other companies would take your stuff, they would host it, and when there's a problem, they would give you a nice little ticket, and then they would let you know about it, and then you pay them for that, and then that's your problem to fix. And apparently that's what they think is a good service, and to you, obviously, you just want to run away from that and go to Derek instead. Because what Derek said, Derek, as much as he can, and I think he's doing it right now, he tries to keep your stuff up without you having to know about it. Similar to how this conference is running, you know, it's organized meticulously. Like, it's amazing. Like, as far as we know, there have been no issues, right? So we're having a good time. You're having a good time. I'm having a good time. So thank you so much. But obviously, there was always something to take care of last minute. And there are staff members behind the scenes taking care of like little details. But the key point that I'm trying to convey is that value is not coming from you having that perfect ticketing system. Value is coming from this concept of you have professionals who are being paid to take care of problems before they let you know that there's a problem that you need to solve. Like that's how most hotels work, like very prestigious hotels. That's how spa. My partner is a beautician. That's how the whole beauty industry works. That's how wellness works. And we are a service industry, and it's really important for us as well to understand that value to the customer means that if we want to be on a high ticket and a highly paid agency, that we better take care of your problems before we pester you about them in Jira boards and Jira tickets. So there's a little bit of everything. There's a little bit for everybody here. So this is a non-technical talk. As Tin already said, I have a background in back-end engineering, but I'm a coach nowadays. So there's a little bit in there for leaders, especially if you're founders of your agencies and you wish your developers would be a little bit more interested in sales. I'm definitely addressing that, and there's going to be a little fun little exercise. I saw those reactions. Thank you. There's going to be a fun little exercise towards the end of the talk. But we are a bit short on time, so I promise we'll get to it, and if necessary, I'll cut some slack in the middle. So with that, let's get started. Let's hope I go the correct way. And my clicker is not working, so production, please. One more time. It did work before you switch screens. Yes. Okay, one more test. Forward, back, awesome. So I'm Denis, I'm a coach. I used to be a backend engineer. One of my first jobs was working for Innovative. Then I left after we chose Silverstripe. And I basically pursued high-performing teams. I went to every team, every startup I could to get my hands on, to work in risky environments, like high-stress, risky environments, but also high-performing, to learn what makes them tick, also to experience what makes them toxic, what makes them sort of burnout, or what makes them sort of unpalatable. Because you get this, especially nowadays with the Gen Z generation, there's quite a timid reaction to recruitment. People don't want to work full-time anymore. They're very hesitant about working full-time for more corporate-y jobs, and that opens up a huge market for all of you guys to run lean, efficient, small agencies where you're tightly knit and you can have a personal partner relationship with your clients, not like a vendor relationship. I will talk about that more later. So I help engineering leaders primarily make their teams more productive without burnout. I'm going to talk about 3 strategies. those three strategies are, if you have to leave, they are consistency. Help me out. No, did I forget? No, consistency. Do I have to cheat? I have to cheat. So they are consistency, planning accuracy. Consistency, burnout prevention, and pricing. So, and particularly pricing in the risk management area. Everything's okay. I remembered. The reason I started this journey and the reason I want to give this talk is because most engineers have never had the opportunity to work in a high-performing team. They've only been working in a low-performing team, and then they sort of stayed at baseline, and then they just managed, the batteries. So I'm cool, burnt out, cool, burnt out, cool, burnt out. But burnout is not fun if you're never really engaged and you're never really working in a high-performing team. And particularly, if most of your engineering managers, leaders, if they grew from engineers, and if they've never had the opportunity to work in a highly performing team, that means that they've never experienced being led by a high-performing leader, and their leadership acumen, their curriculum was basically based on low-performing teams. So you just keep propagating the same problems over generation, and you have things like, Agile and Jira, and most engineers start their careers like this. It's like happy teams start with Jira. There's this underlying premise that if those issues aren't perfectly cataloged in tickets, then the project will be terrible. And the inverse is also true. That you might think that in order for the project to be successful, in order for the project to be expensive or to carry high margin, if you're an agency, that it has to be perfectly cataloged and planned and meticulously detailed. And if you try that, I've tried it for 20 years. I can tell it doesn't work. But if you try that, I'm sure I can see some nods. Okay, thank you. If you try that, it's definitely, there's something about it that just doesn't work. So I'm here to help you get some new ideas. So for you, what's in it for you? I'll help you sort of understand what the differences between engagement and burnout, how to focus more on planning accurately, and how all of that really ties together to your everyday life in agencies, particularly how that affects you for pricing strategy or cost reduction. Usually it's one side of the coin. I'm sure Dirk would be interested in cost reduction. If you're a branding agency, you'd be probably interested in how to create high-ticket offers for your clients. As long as of course, technology has to be involved because I do have a slight bias towards engineering. So I figured a good start would be this idea: is that there's a lot of risk involved with engineering projects, branding projects that involve technology. We can wrap it down, but particularly. I've seen this sentiment with my coaching clients the most. I always go to the engineers, ask them, how do you guys make money? And usually it's, well, we work for hours and then we bill them for the hours. That's sort of the lowest standard. That's sort of the basic understanding of business. But generally, it really comes down to risk. See, a client with a risky project serviced by a burnt-out team will confuse the lack of impact in their strategy, so in the client's strategy, with the perceived incompetence of the team, and then they will want a discount. So, in simpler terms, if you have a risky project and your execution is also risky, if the client wasn't so sure about how valuable the thing they wanted to buy is, if you mess it up, they'll think that their risk, their bad strategy, that it was your fault, and then you might end up in like a endless cycle of blaming each other, without actually having a good project to begin with. And a lot of companies burn out, agencies especially, they burn out exactly from this, that the risk for the client was never managed, the risk for the client was never assessed. We're just happy to have a paying client. You try to figure out what they will be sort of happy with, and then there were problems. And then one of the solutions that can happen, you can give them a nice little board and you enumerate all of the possible problems, or you solve it for them. There's a nice parallel I like to make regarding high performance with athletes. See, athletes, they don't go full out. When they train, when they practice, when they prepare for a big event, they are extremely, extremely meticulous about avoiding injury. In software, in our industry, that injury is essentially spiritual and emotional. So either it's burnout or having people in your organization that you don't want to talk to, people in your organization whom you might be avoiding or who might be avoiding you. And it's this idea that, yes, I can achieve the project, but maybe I'll have to work overtime, and maybe I'll have to plan a little bit more. Maybe I'll have to force my engineers to work a little bit harder. What does harder mean? How does that affect quality? And then you go to your accountant, and they tell you, hey, actually, if they work more, we make more money. Isn't that a good thing? And this is typically the worst offender that I see in, let's say, less mature organizations, is they say, yeah, we'll do something like Scrum Fall. Scrum Fall is when you do waterfall every week. I don't recommend it. And combine it with hourly billing. So you sort of look at it and say, hey, okay, so if I want a high ticket offer, that's the formula. I picked an hourly rate, and yeah, if you want to make more money, we need to work more hours. How do we work more hours? Well, we need to make sure those hours are billable. Ooh, nice. And then, of course, what do? You hire more engineers, and then you figure out that I spoke to most of you, by the way, on last night's party. Everybody agrees that most of your expenses are salaries to engineers, right? So yes, hours are easy to scale. You just hire more people, which is a bit tough in today's market. Everybody here is also sort of kind of trying to recruit engineers. Had like 5 people ask me yesterday if I'm still coding and if I'm interested. Thank you, by the way. I appreciate it. But that's beside the point. See, if you get really good at what it is you do, there's also a chance that you might be able to do it in a shorter time. Now, let's imagine you do it in half the time. Would you double your hourly rate? Would your existing customers be open to that? Now, see, I say 50% off and 2x on the other side. That's actually a bad deal for you, because you make the same amount of money. But you also have the logistical burden of needing twice the amount of clients to actually break even. So for you, being twice as fast and charging twice as much is a terrible deal. It's also a terrible deal for your client. So this formula obviously doesn't work. But most organizations, especially, and I've seen the worst. I've seen a lot of messes. Most organizations do not get past this point. I always ask them, if I coach you, if I make your team better, if we increase performance and eliminate waste, how do you guys make more money? If you finish faster, how do you make more money? If you build a better quality product, will you charge more? Like, will you actually charge more? Or will there be some imposter syndrome, some fear of rejection that the client might say no, and you've known this client for 10 years, you can't just increase their prices? This is where most companies fail. So I researched this, and I have some ideas for you. And of course, there will be those companies that tell you, hey, our competitive advantage is that we're super passionate. We'll go the extra mile, and we'll work overtime. And then I always show them this. I always show them this comic. So it's the Jonathan Stark is great, by the way, for pricing strategy, especially for solopreneurs and agencies. So passion is an output, not an input. I'm not sure if Simon Sinek actually said that, but it sounds like something Simon would say. It's like, passion is an output, not an input. And then he would fix his glasses like this. See, passion is not something you recruit for. I've seen a lot of job descriptions recently, and they always say, oh, we have the most passionate developers, we only hire the most passionate people. But passion is not something you curate for. Passion is something you create. Your engineering teams, never mind engineering, your coworkers in general will be passionate about their work, about their mission, if it's fun working with you guys, if they're being supported, if the clients they're working for are amazing, if they're being considered a business partner, not just a vendor, not just, oh, you're the designer, you do the PDF thing, you're the engineer, you do the PHP thing, I don't know what you do exactly, where you essentially get minimized to a vendor, to a cost center, and then somebody's optimizing your cost. So passion has to do with how engaged your team is, how good they feel about working in the work environment. And with their relationships with the peers. So it all comes down to, yes, we've gone into this industry to talk to computers, to avoid human contact. And we like to say we're introverts. And then most of our tough problems are people problems. So strategy tip number 1, improve planning accuracy. But planning accuracy, not the way the Agile community or the Scrum Fall community will tell you, with reliable and consistent behavior. Again, coming back to the human factor. Because most people will tell you, help me out here, most people will tell you improve planning with accuracy, with reliable, I'm looking for a word starting with E. Someone? Yes, in the back? Estimates? Did someone say estimates? I heard a whisper of estimates. Most people think that everything will be great if we just estimate more reliably. People keep asking me, Dennis, how can we make our estimates more reliable? How our team, when they estimate, they're like way off. I got news for you. The project won't go better just because you're fantasizing about it more. Estimation is a speculative endeavor that costs time, and it doesn't become more accurate the more you think about it. It becomes accurate by putting it into practice and then seeing where you ended up. So my mantra is, if you want to be on time, you have to be on time every day. Now that's very hard if you don't know what on time looks like, what on time every day looks like. Now that doesn't mean that you're working to capacity every day, but it does mean that you sort of have to have a sense of, are we going according to plan? And to have that sort of sense every day, not just the final week before the deadline. Because a lot of companies sort of say, okay, yeah, I think things are going okay. Nobody's that giant Jira board with all the tickets that everybody obsesses about, it's empty. And then towards the end, of course, everything explodes. So it's about consistency. Yeah? Strategy tip number 1 is about consistency. You got to be on time every day. If you don't know what that looks like, it's probably because your planning accuracy is not very reliable. So Milan Milanovic has on the bottom left, you see his logo. I will share the slides, so don't worry. It's a bit of a bad picture, not that I see it. He describes this problem of you estimating things and creating a plan. That's first principles, kind of. I have engineers, they cost X amount, and they need to do something. But the problem is you only plan for stuff going well. You say, how can we do this project within the deadline? And that's sort of a low standard to set, because ideally you would consider all options. Okay, this is our plan. What happens if we can make it? What happens if we can't make it? What will we do if we can make it afterwards? And what will we do if we can't make it? So you have a contingency plan. Right, so Kent Beck recently wrote about this on his blog. He said, agility and incremental planning has nothing, it's poker. It's nothing to do with creating a perfect plan. It's to minimize the cost of you being wrong. You have certain assumptions going into a project. What you want to do is you want to sort of analyze where you're headed and where decision paths can differ, where you can your plan can diverge from reality, and then to figure out what the cost of that divergence is. That also means no heroics, because heroics would be anything that requires extraordinary effort, overtime work, weekend work, putting people on the project too late while it's already behind, because every heroic will mask the problem. If you mask the problem, then you can't deal with it. So you kind of need to have a framework where you can consistently deliver on quality at margin, by the way, so that even when things go wrong, it'll just cut into your margins, not specifically into your primary revenue. So you won't have an existential crisis. Now, a lot of people ignore this, and then they still come to me for advice when they have that existential crisis. But then you're desperate. Then you're sort of like a few years too late, and then it's very hard to make decisions, to make improvements, because all options in front of you are difficult. I like to quote Alex on this. Alex is a serial entrepreneur. He says, the difference between experts and beginners is that experts find more ways to reward themselves while they work. So they're not more disciplined. They're just find ways to reward themselves for consistency. You know, when he says they just found more ways to win, they reward themselves for consistency. Alex is also a fitness junkie, so you can probably see where this is coming from. Because the biggest problem, if I can make a parallel with fitness, if you have a fitness coach, does anybody here go to the gym? Any good gym goers? Okay. Oh wow. Yes. Thank you. Awesome. Okay. So, one person in the audience. The point, if you get a fitness if you go into a, if you buy a gym membership, your biggest problem is not that you'll go there and it won't show results. The biggest problem is that you'll buy the membership and then day 2, when things get tough, you won't show up. Right? So you don't have a plan for when your body resists what you plan to do. In the same way, engineering teams or software teams, agencies, you need to have a plan for when your plan doesn't go according to plan. Right? So you need to have contingency plans for, we think that's how it's going to go, and if it doesn't, then we let you know on this date. And this is how we can course correct, and this is how much budget will be left over in case we're wrong. A lot of organizations that I work with, they do that at the end, which is also my main gripe with things like Scrum and any kind of like fixed unit organizational concept. Now, but how do you find optimal growth? We use this analogy for athletes. What does productivity look like for engineering teams? See, productivity is not coding faster. We thought that was the case, but since the advent of mob programming and pair programming, we saw that more hands at the keyboard was actually more beneficial rather than... It's also more expensive, so that makes it a bit of a more challenging cost analysis. But generally, the productivity angle is secondary to your client's ability to predict how you'll work with them. See, paying clients judge engineering primarily by your ability to deliver and how you communicate if you don't. Similar to a restaurant. Imagine you're going to a high-end restaurant. If you're going to pay them a lot of money, you are essentially exchanging trust. And I'm going to get to the matter of money in a bit. But if I'm paying a lot of money to a restaurant, I essentially want them to deliver. So I want consistency. If I pay them a lot of money, the way they can mess up this relationship is by not delivering on the day that I'm there. So I'm not there expecting extraordinary heroics, like a spike in quality, just because I paid a lot of money, and usually people take the middle option and I took the high option. What I expect is that 7 days of the week, service is 10 out of 10. Because that guarantee is what allows them to give me a high ticket price. And if they can't, they communicate in advance. Or they say, hey, sorry, we overbooked. We can move you to this and that. We can move you to this and that place. But usually not in the terms of heroics. You wouldn't like to be squeezed into the corner because they overbooked, and then you have a miserable night just because they didn't want to lose you having booked that evening rather than trying to give you an alternative experience. So here's a little exercise. This is a screenshotable slide. You'll see this later as well. The first 3 you'll know from Scrum. This is a very simple exercise I do with all my coaching clients about planning accuracy, right? So how you can sort of build this muscle. This is an exercise, like a kata, that you can do organizationally or on your own to get a little bit more, to get a sense of, okay, what's my baseline? And the important thing is, you'll notice this, it's similar to Kanban, it's similar to Scrum. So you pick a block. A week is fine. We're not extreme here with Stripes, the fintech company, 100 deployments per day or anything of that sort. Pick a time limit. Make a list of everything that's important to you, of everything that you want your team to work on, and then do exactly what you said you will work on. Now, the point with my problem with things like Scrum and other agile implementations is that they tell you this is what you need to do, and then you're not allowed to change the plan. And what does it do? Well, then everybody says, yeah, but what if it's like, if I lend you money, you have to pay me back. And then What if I don't? Well, you have to. What if I don't? Well, you have to. What if any Game of Thrones fans out there? So that's kind of the point. Scrum tells you, hey, you're not allowed to change the plan. But what if my client wants me to change the plan? Well, you're not allowed to. Well, I'm not sure I'm not sure I am gonna tell them no. What happens if we have to? And then there's no answer. So the point is, we're not looking for a perfect plan that you can execute. Like burn down charts are the bane of my existence. Like I wish burn down charts have never been integrated into Jira. But the point really is that the bolded parts tell you what to do when the plan doesn't go according to plan. When something goes wrong, life happens. So stop the list if you get to 10. That's kind of, Stop the list if you think it's going terribly. So if you think 10 out of 10 would not serve the client, you stop it immediately. Don't wait till the end of the week that you've picked to tell them the bad news. Just you got bad news, stop it and tell them the bad news. Also stop the list if you want to make a change the list. If you want to make a change to the list before you got past half of the score. Why is that important? Well, if you change the list before 5 out of 10, that means that you probably have a habit of changing the list before the halfway point, which means you spend more time planning than you do execution, which means half of the stuff you plan during planning is nonsense, is absolute waste. Not only is it going to happen maybe later, it's definitely never going to happen, and you're definitely paying for it. And if you're an agency, your clients are paying for it, and then that's probably cutting into your margins. Now the last one is the one that's really key. If you got to the end, if you didn't have to interrupt it inappropriately, you score it, and you reduce the time limit. So what we want to figure out is how long does it take before you can no longer honor your word? So when do you become unreliable? You said this will take 2 weeks. Okay, how long into those 2 weeks until the cone of uncertainty starts getting a little bit shaky? Right, so that's what we want to know. It's not about who's to blame, what went wrong, which ticket, but we want to know what is the shortest amount of time that you can make a commitment for that you'll be at least 80% accurate on your commitment. At least 80% accurate on delivery, that you'll do what you said you would do, or at least that you would communicate to a high standard before the standard drops. Obviously, if you're an A student and you do 10 out of 10 twice per day, then yeah, go ahead, expand it. But usually companies that I work with are in that sort of bottom half section, like scoring 3 to maybe 7. Most companies deal with this problem of they just spend way too much time planning stuff that is completely irrelevant to their actual priorities, and they don't know what their actual priorities are because they don't spend enough time reality checking what they have available to them because they spend too much time in planning meetings. So it's just a devilish cycle that sort of, it's like a snake eating its own tail. It's a quote that I like to use from Herminia Ibarra. She's a researcher. We learn who we are in practice, not in theory. Right? So your clients won't judge you for your contracts. They won't judge you for the plans, that perfect Jira board about what's inside it, what tickets are inside it. They will judge you for your actions. They will judge you for your engineering team's actions, for your designer team's actions, for your customer support's actions. They will judge you if there's a small problem in parking or somebody spills coffee on them when they arrive at your company. That will cut into the relationship with them. Okay, strategy tip number 2, scientific engagement. So generally, again, to recap, it's about consistency, engagement, burnout prevention primarily, and number 3 is pricing. So there was a recent study that said that if you wanna keep a high-performing team, or at least train a low-performing team into a high-performing team, the first thing you need to do is to teach them how to process and prevent burnout. Because if they burn out, they will never be engaged. There was a recent study that interviewed like 13,000 engineers in various kinds of tech companies, mostly agencies, on the consequences of burnout. And they found like these 3 pillars. So leadership, support, organizational culture, and opportunities to learn, and burnout, engagement, and intentions to stay. You've probably seen the intention to stay problem, where If somebody quits, their productivity immediately plummets to zero, even if they're contractually still obliged to stay with you. So it's attrition that's really important. It's their intention to stay, not what the contract says they need to do. And in the same vein, productivity has more to do with engagement than it does with burnout. Now, burnout can prevent engagement, but as the study shows, if your team struggles with burnout, leadership support is amazing, because the leader can help them say, oh, hold on, it's been a rough week, take a day off. That's great. The worst thing you can do as a leader when your team is burnt out is to complain about performance. Is to talk to them about salary cuts, about layoffs, because that'll not only burn them out further, but also disengage them. Culture is everything you do. It's basically how fun it is to work at your company. But opportunities to learn is then the thing that you can help your team to drive engagement, right? So if they're not burnt out, if they're sort of healthy, going to the gym or not going to the gym, as everyone here, how you can improve their productivity is to engage them more. But that means leadership support doesn't help with that anymore. Leadership support only helps if they're unhealthy. Once they're healthy, they need to engage with their peers. They need to feel like they're business partners with their clients, not just vendors. They need to feel like it's fun to show up. They need to feel like they're supported. They have the funding, they have the tools, they have the hardware, to have access to the things they need access to. And they generally, what kills engagement is bureaucracy. So it's those Jira boards with those tickets that you say, hey, tell the customer there's a problem so we can complain about it to them and charge them for it. So optimize for performance, yes, but at the level where you can consistently avoid burnout. If you can't deliver on time anything, if you can't get your clients to pay without a single heroic, without working overtime or working a little bit extra on the weekend, then you haven't gotten to your consistency yet. This is very important. Yes, high standards, but no heroics. Because when you prevent heroics, I just saw a flicker, we cool? Is that me? All good, okay. When you prevent heroics, you allow projects to fail sooner, of course, getting feedback. I'm a dad of twins. They're about to become 2 years old, and they give amazing feedback. It's basically, I ask them something, and it's yeah, or I ask them something, and it's nah, no, right? And that's a cool temperature check. You want to go to your client, of course, don't show them the messy stuff. It has to be incrementally improved. It has to be pretty. It has to be still serving the client. Just ask them, hey, is this a yeah? Or is this a meh, go away, right? It has to look like it's still serving them, even if it's incremental. If you think you're already messed up and you should have asked for advice, then absolutely don't do a heroic to cover up for failure. That never works out. Now the fun stuff. Now, pricing. When it comes to pricing, I've seen a lot of crazy things. But generally, pricing, we misunderstand what money is. Money is that exchange of trust. You know that restaurant analogy that I used earlier. If I'm paying 200 euros for a night out, then they better guarantee that I'll have a great night. If I'm paying them 5 euros for a little pizza slice, I'm basically buying a commodity from a vendor. I can have a miserable day, and when I go there, I will still have a miserable day. The point is, if I have a high-ticket offer, it should make a huge impact on the client, which means you're managing the risk that they bring to the table. So I'm risky, and they manage my risk. It's not their incompetence that's risky about me paying them a lot of money. That's very important, and that's a lot of pricing strategies get that wrong. So the whole hourly pricing shenanigans, those shouldn't be your most expensive offers. If you're billing anything hourly, price and materials, that's your cheapest offer, because you're putting all the risk on the client, right? So whoever takes the most risk, manages the most risk, they should keep the most money. Now, this means if your team takes the most risk because they work overtime, they should take most of the margins. If your client takes most of the risk because they get to explain to their customers, they get to be late, they get to miss some important conference, they will probably ask for a discount. Now, but if you understand their risk, and the risk of their strategy, not the risk of working with you, the risk of their idea, the risk of their project, the risk of their brand change, if you can manage it, you can create a high-ticket offer. But only if your team is not burnt out, only if your team is engaged, and if you can validate value, not just create value. You know, the whole Agile community tells you value this, value that. Yeah, but what's value? Value isn't something you create. Value is something you put in front of a customer and say, okay, is this according to expectations? And then you stay there and you shut up and you let them, you know, if they have negative feedback, then learn how to take that negative feedback and immediately course correct rather than following the plan. Now, I have a fun little challenge here, and I promise I'll be brief because I see the timer, so I feel the pressure. Okay. This is now the crowd exercise. So, show of, I actually need an assistant because I'm biased. I know the right answer, although there isn't one. Din, would you help me? So I just need you to be an unbiased judge and just tell me which option won by show of hands. Oh, okay. I just gut feel or count them, but we will go over it quickly. So I'll explain them first, and then we can play. So raise your hand if you think the most value to the client is that you just deliver the software. Raise your hand. Good. We have a good crowd. Okay, cool. Raise your hand if you think the most value to the client is, if they're e-commerce, a higher conversion rate. If that is the most value that you can deliver to them in the project, of the options. Okay? And raise your hand if you think the most value to the client is guaranteed maintenance after the project is done. Okay. Okay, which one? C. Yes, C, right? Because it's yes, A got 0. By the way, for the stream audience, A got 0. Good, great audience. B, higher conversion rates. I think it's about 40-60. Yeah, about 40-60, 40 on higher conversion rates, C on guaranteed maintenance. See, that's what's valuable to the client. They don't care about when the software is delivered. They care about, hey, does it solve my problem? And once I've paid, will it continue solving my problem? Right, so is this a scam, essentially? That's great. Okay, now this one's a little bit trickier. By the way, they are getting more challenging as we go. There's only 2 more, so we got. Most risk. Okay, now this one's a little bit challenging, so do take 5 seconds to think about it. So if you think the most risk to the client is the uncertainty of the delivery date, so you're not quite sure. That doesn't mean that they'll get it now or in 7 years, but it's basically, you know, the strictness to the deadline. If you think the most risk to the client is the uncertainty of the delivery date, then raise your hand. Good. Great audience. If you think the most risk to the client is the uncertainty of the cost, so if the costs can sort of balloon or expand, raise your hand. Okay, we're getting some engagement. Good. You got it? And raise your hand if you think the most risk to the client is the uncertainty of him. Okay, thank you. I felt that. Everybody, you know, that wasn't just raised hands. That was just because if you put these 2 things together, right? Remember what we said at the beginning. The biggest problem is that the client is coming to you with a risk. It's not about the risk of working with you, about your engineers being late or you not giving accurate enough estimates. It's about they are not sure whether this project is even successful. They are not sure whether what they're paying for is actually going to make sense. Yes, you can set up a branding page, but why? How does it affect your strategy? Will it generate more inbound leads? Are you going to use it for outbound and sort of, you know, you have your website everywhere? Is that how it's going to work? It's their uncertainty in the impact. That's really important. That's the biggest risk. If you can manage the uncertainty of the impact, well, then you have the formula for a high-ticket offer, as long as your team is playing along. Now, the most challenging one, and then I'm done. What's the best deal? Now, we're putting it all together. This is a little bit more complex. So, option A, the outcome is uncertain, variable cost, variable scope. So, that's your typical hourly pricing. We're not sure. You wanted to buy something, but it'll be done when it's done. Option B, I'll explain them first because it's a little bit more complex. Option B is a fixed cost project. Scope is kind of variable depending on how things go because there are experiments involved, but we do promise that we will try multiple experiments in trying to validate the idea. So we will just give you something. We'll see if it works and make sure it doesn't spend the entire budget. So then if it doesn't work, we have budget left over to gather feedback, to talk with you, to make sure that you really want the impact that you asked for, if it's even possible within the budget. And option C is You plan everything to death. You have the perfect contract, and there will be 0 deviation from the contract. You have a perfect plan. If something goes wrong, we only course correct after the contract is done, and then we'll talk about, this is your typical government agency, right? So, again, show of hands now. For A, raise your hand. Such a great audience. For B, raise your hand. Okay, nice. C? Okay. B. Okay, so I think B was the winner overall. Exactly. Right. So a lot of agencies get this idea wrong that, not really agencies, but the relationship inside the agency. This idea, you all know it, but your engineers might not. Your software designers might not. Your copywriters might not. They think that when you give them the task, when you parallelize work, it goes into the other column. This is what you told me I had to do, so I will do it. Or you told me you wanted X, so I'll keep working at it until it's perfect. If you want more advice about hourly billing and what all the alternatives you can check out Jonathan Stark's new book. It just recently got published. I learned a lot about hourly billing from Jonathan. Any Jonathan Stark fans here? Jonathan Stark, new name? Okay, so I introduced you to somebody new. So enjoy the book. So wrapping up, what does pricing have to do with iterative development and burnout? Well, if you want a high-ticket offer, you need to understand, first of all, your team needs to not be risky. So it must not be risky to work with you, so that then you can have a sort of calm team. You can go to sales negotiations like Gorast, just calm, collected, and then you can absorb the rage from the client, and then just tell them, okay, this is your situation, cool, this is what you want to do, here's what I need you to do. We have these 2 options, these 3 options, which one's within your budget, which one's according to your appetite. And then if you actually manage to handle that risk, so if you weren't just guessing, if you actually show evidence of being able to handle that risk, manage that risk, then you got a recipe for a great agency. Now, we saw what happened yesterday regarding the whole Silver Stripe org and sort of a little bit of the depressing parts of the first presentation. It was this disagreement between, hey, should we manage risk? Should we just continue with our plan? Should we course correct aggressively, not aggressively? Who's paying for everything? Should we rely more on volunteers and the open source community, or should we leverage it more towards a private company or an enterprise? How do we manage control? Derek did say, take control. So yes, it was kind of a revolution. I think so too. I felt that. Okay, but remember, I'm giving you some new ideas here. There were some screenshotable slides in there. You are probably here because you love change. You're probably here because you want to learn something new. You're on a party. But some people just hate change. Not because they think you're wrong. They just hate change. You just tell them an idea, and you kind of have to nail a good day with them. You probably have a coworker like that. But it only takes one person to change something, to run an experiment and show the evidence. Like, give them data. It only takes you. Thank you. Here's the...
Thank you, Denis. Sorry.
Yeah, if you do want to do the 5-day challenge, the one for planning accuracy, I prepared a little sort of self-paced course for you. It's free. It's an email with guided videos. If you want to check it out. This will be in the slide deck as well. So enjoy.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any questions for Denis?
We might not have time for questions, but I am here for lunch.
I have a question.
Go for it.
So it's a stupid one, but if I hire someone to fix my roof at a house, and I think the risk of impact is not so important than the risk of cost, because at the end he'll be like, oh, it was much more work than I thought.
Well, who should pay if they fell from the roof?
Well,
what happens if they fall from the roof?
Well,
should you pay for that?
No, he's insured probably.
I don't know, is he? That's my point. See, that's my point.
Well, he's probably from Macedonia or Albania.
No, but I get your point.
No, but
that's that's also a commodity. They've probably repaired a specific type of roof thousands of times, so they can get it really done. They have a lot of evidence that they have solved exactly this problem plenty of times, and they can get it down to you to a very cheap service because they have commoditized what it is that they're doing. So they have basically minimized the amount of hours they need, and now they command a fairly high hourly rate for that. That is still, depending on how much you trust them and what else is available on the market, it gives them a competitive edge. But the competitive edge is not passion. The competitive edge isn't that they can sort of do saltos on the roof and not fall down. Their competitive edge is probably that they've done it so many times that they can show you evidence that, yes, people trust me. I've done this a million times. I come into your home and I'm calm. I'm not stressed out. It's not risky to work with me. That's what's most important. When I had my walls painted, I didn't care about, what model the color is. What I cared about is, are they making a mess, and are they screaming at each other? Like, is there? Because I'm working from home, right? Because I can hear them. So I just wanted to know, okay, is this going to be a disaster that I have to manage? In which case, I want a discount, or tell them to go away, or will this be calm and collected? But that's what's important. Good question.
Thanks.
Cool.
All right. Anything else? Nope. All right. Big round of applause for Denis. Thanks. Thank you, Denis.